Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna.
everyone. We are live. We're running late this morning as an ashram, as a collective. So no problem. I don't think it's a problem, at least. So we've been studying Srimad Bhagavatam now for quite some time, deriving a ton of benefit from doing this. I personally wouldn't keep doing it if I wasn't deriving benefit, but I feel as an ashram we're collectively making advancement, and it's noticeable to me and my wife and hopefully you guys. So we'll continue on. What did we talk about last time was Emperor Parikshit's position, how from the Western mindset a lot of this stuff may seem a lot of mystical, magical, even could be, legends and so on. But to give it a chance and to also realize scientifically we don't really know very much of anything with our current sensory understanding of the world. And that we should not be so quick to reject something because it sounds mystical, legendary, or something of fables, because it may actually contain a significant amount of truth. So we're studying the Bhagavatam, which contains plenty of those things. Anyone who studies it will derive great benefit from the wisdom contained therein. And it'll surely transform one into a much happier and more blissful person. It actually said to remove all of one's troubles, which is attractive to everyone in this troubled world, because everyone's in trouble to some degree. And if you're not in trouble, you're not that smart, because you're not aware that the death, the ultimate trouble of death, disease, old age is coming for all of us. And then what do we do about this existential crisis? So anyway, we've been talking about the Emperor of the world, Maharaj Parikshit. We talked about the unified, I don't know if we did get to mention it, but we should mention there was a unified world government at that time. The advanced civilization of India, actually, of ancient India, at one point this was called the Aryan race. This was the thing that Hitler, got demonized so badly, and it's Hitler's fault. But, or who knows, the winners of wars write history. But anyway, it doesn't matter. It was totally Hitler's fault, at least from most of the world's perspective, that the Aryan race got such a bad rap, so to say. But actually, there was an Aryan world government. You see so many connections even between ancient India, the Egyptian and the ancient South American civilizations. They all had pyramids, they all had very similar architecture. It seemed to be a unified world language. So there's many, many things that have been found all over the world that give evidence to such claims. And the Bhagavatam and many other scriptures give this type of claim.
India used to be called Aryavat back in the days.
Yes, Aryavat.
Aryavat. So people living there were Aryans.
Ah.
So that was the context of being an Aryan. And
yes.
A lot of rishis and a lot of people who were highly enlightened and spiritual, they were very smart. So the idea of being an Aryan was very attractive, and Hitler read a lot of these things like history and a lot of spiritual and religious stuff. So
yes.
he wanted to build that Aryan race in the West.
Yes, and he claimed that the Aryan, because there is actually some evidence that the Aryans were, at least some of the, they say the higher castes of the Aryans were lighter and things like that. So it's just yes. What's that?
The motivation was from Nisha basically, but Nietzsche. So Nietzsche.
Oh, Friedrich Nietzsche.
Friedrich Nietzsche.
Yeah.
The Hitler's motivation mostly because, anyway, his sisters, the document his sister shouldn't have revealed because it was personal nature. Hitler got on hand with that. His personal diary basically, because he wanted some correction on that, he doesn't want it published, and his sister got it and published it anyway. And that Hitler got, and which inclined the fascist movement is right. He want to label that superiority of men by Aryan race. So
Well, whatever. Today's class is definitely not on Hitler, but good to have some of this context. But there was a unified Aryan. Oh, I somehow got tomato chutney. I didn't even cook. Help part.
The cheddar also got the Hogan.
Yes. So what could be done? So yes, Hitler, was trying to find information more about this Aryan race. He even raided Tibet and tried to find a lot more information there. Actually tried to find Shambhala, which is also mentioned. It was mentioned earlier. This is where Kalki will come and take his birth, or appearance in this world, and it's where great rishis even today live. It's a hidden mystical city with beings far greater than the common person. That you're probably not going to find it because they know how to stay hidden from the common populace. Exactly, they're very, very, yeah, yes. Something like Wakanda is like a spin-off of some type of what Shambhala is actually said to be. So anyway.
One last thing. Just one.
One more. Go ahead.
Have you seen Doctor Strange by any chance?
Yes, I did see Doctor Strange.
So when Doctor Strange go to the Tibetan Himalayan temple in Nepal, the other monk who gave him the Wi-Fi password, the password name was Shambhala.
Ah, that's very interesting. Yeah, the Marvel, all these movies, actually a lot of these, the Illuminati, which means the illuminated ones, but they have, they rule much of the world and society, and they have a lot of information of these things, and they actually have a vested interest because we are kind of like the farm animals of the, of the ultimate, civilization. Or they're not so interested in keeping us into so much information. But they love to put it out there in movies and things like that. And we love it too. We eat it up, we love it, and we have no idea. It's closer to reality than we could understand. But anyway, now let's do the Bhagavatam. So, we'll get there, Pish. We'll get there. So I'm going to share this now. Let me see. One of you guys. All right. And don't rush me. Sometimes you guys rush me when I'm doing the prayers. Ajnanadipandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshashunitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yudhapada Kamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathan Vitam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Etanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Cha Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindaneshwari Vrishabhanu Ste Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakaltarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama
Vasudevaya. Namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim sarvasutim vyasam tato jayamudire. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayan, unto Nar Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author.
Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is Paramatma in everyone's heart and the benefactor of truthful devotee, cleanses the desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee, who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted.
By regular attendance in the class of on the Bhagavatam, by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. And loving service unto the personality of the Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact.
Parth, what's the mean on and all about the Vasudevaya?
I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of God.
Very good. We get Parth included in there too. All right. So we're continuing on with our reading. We are on text 11, 1, 4, 11. So, we're going to continue on with the explanation of how the Bhagavatam came to be spoken, and it was spoken between Emperor Parikshit and Shukadeva Goswami, and the scene is being set. It was mentioned the last verse, how he was a great emperor and he possessed all the opulences of his acquired kingdom. And he was the exaltation and increasing prestige of the Pandu dynasty. Why did he just give up everything and sit down on the bank of the Ganges and fast until death? So they wanted to know these things. And now we may also want to know. And so now we'll know. Namanti yat padaniketam atmana Shivaya haniya danani shatrava Katham savira shriyamangadustyajam Yuvai shatot trashtumaho sahasubhi Namanti, bow down, Yatpada, whose feet? Niketam, under, Atmana, own, Shivaya, welfare. That's very interesting. Shivaya means welfare. Haniya, used to bring about. Dhanani, wealth. Shatrava, enemies. Katham, for what reason? Saha, he. Viraha, the chivalrous. Shriyam, opulences. Anga, Dustyajam, insuperable? Maybe this, what it says inseparable in yours? Alright, so I have the original version that may have a few errors. So, inseparable, Dustyajam. Yuva, in full youth. Aishata, desired. Utrashtum, to give up. Aho, exclamation. Saha, with. Asubhi, life. Translation. He was such a great emperor that all his enemies would come and bow down at his feet and surrender all their wealth for their own benefit. He was full of youth and strength, and he possessed why does it keep saying insuperable? Inseparable kingly opulences. Is insuperable a word? Why would they put that twice? We're going to just see. Insuperable has a definition. Impossible to overcome. Yeah, it's impossible to overcome. So maybe that is actually the word that he possessed insuperable kingly opulences, or impossible to overcome kingly opulences. It makes more sense than inseparable in this context. So, good thing we checked. So, and he possessed insuperable kingly opulences, or unmatched kingly opulences. Why did he want to give up everything, including his life? Good question. Purport by Prabhupada. There was nothing undesirable in his life. He was quite a young man and could enjoy life with power and opulence. So there was no question of retiring from active life. There was no difficulty in collecting the state taxes because he was so powerful and chivalrous. Chivalrous is like heroic. That's actually, the word was viraha, right? And vira, virasana in yoga is like hero's pose. So to be like a great hero. Vira, what is it? Virabhadrasana is like the heroic warrior's pose, like this. So anyway, chivalrous. He was so powerful and chivalrous that even his enemies would come to him and bow down at his feet and surrender all wealth for their own benefit. Maharaj Parikshit was a pious king. He conquered his enemies, and therefore the kingdom was full of prosperity. There was enough milk, grains, and metals. That's like wealth. And all the rivers and mountains were full of potency. So materially everything was satisfactory. Therefore there was no question of untimely giving up his kingdom and life. The sages were eager to hear all about this, hear about all of this. So we'll learn why. Shivaya lokasya bhavaya bhutaye ya uttama shloka parayana janaha jivanti natmartham aso parashrayam mumocha nirvidya kuta kalevaram Shivaya, welfare, lokasya, of all living beings, bhavaya, for flourishing, bhutaye, for economic development, yea, one who is, uttama shloka parayanaha, devoted to the cause of the personality of Godhead.
Devoted to the cause of the personality of Godhead.
Uttama shloka is a name for, so he's the ultimate from which all the shlokas are pointing to. All the verses. Janaha, men, jivanti, do live, na, but not, atma artham, selfish interest, aso, that, para ashrayam, shelter for others, mumocha, gave up, nirvidya, being freed from all attachment, kutaha, for what reason, kalevaram, mortal body. Those who are devoted to the cause, translation, those who are devoted to the cause of the personality of Godhead live only for the welfare, development, and happiness of others. This is important. They do not live for any selfish interest. So even though the emperor, Parikshit, was free from all attachment to worldly possessions, how could he give up his mortal body, which was shelter for others? So this is a good question. This is the nature of devotees. They're constantly living for the welfare, development, and happiness of others. It's the opposite of what we're used to. We're not. What it means to be a devotee is a very high standard. And when we really evaluate ourselves, especially in the neophyte stage, in this beginning stage of devotional service, we realize I'm not very much a devotee at all. Actually, the great devotees, they never even consider themselves devotees. They always consider them, I'm aspiring, I want to be a devotee. Maybe one day I'll be a devotee. So like this, that's why they develop such humility, because it's such a high standard to be completely devoted to the Lord. And that means being devoted to all of the Lord's other living entities and servants. So this is a high standard. Maybe one day we'll get there. So even though he was free from all attachment to worldly possessions, how could he give up his mortal body, which was shelter for others? So it meant he was using his body properly for the welfare of others. He was ruling the world in such an incredibly pious way. How could he just give it all up? So we're going to learn. Purport. Parikshit Maharaj was an ideal king and householder because he was a devotee of the personality of Godhead. A devotee of the Lord automatically has all good qualifications, and the emperor was a typical example of this. Personally, he had no attachment for all the worldly opulences in his possession, but since he was king for the all-around welfare of his citizens, he was always busy in the welfare work of the public, not only for this life, but also for the next. He would not allow slaughterhouses or killing of cows. He was not a foolish and partial administrator who would arrange for the protection of one living being and allow another to be killed. Because he was a devotee of the Lord, he knew perfectly well how to conduct his administration for everyone's happiness, men, animals, plants, and all living creatures. He was not selfishly interested. Selfishness is either self-centered or self-extended. He was neither. His interest was to please the Supreme Truth, personality of Godhead. Self-extended means like, maybe your wife gives you a lot of pleasure, then all of a sudden she becomes like a part of yourself. And now her interests are in your forefront, your children and so on. So a lot of people, they think, oh, I'm not selfish, I'm constantly giving to my family. But why does your family take a special position over anyone else? So like this, actually, you see that Parikshit and all these top level devotees, even if their son, who is very dear to one naturally, is doing wrong, they will not be partial. So that's what self-extended means. The extensions of the self, but it's really part of yourself. It's usually wife, family, relatives, friends like this. He was neither. His interest was to please the Supreme Truth, personality of Godhead. The king is the representative of the Supreme Lord, and therefore the king's interest must be identical with that of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord wants all living beings to be obedient to him and thereby become happy. So actually this is why the Lord wants us to be obedient to him. So we can actually be happy. He's not selfishly interested. Yes, be obedient to me because I want this and I want that. I want to exploit you. No, the Lord He's developed a system in which all living entities could be happy. We were talking yesterday. We were talking with a Christian boy, and Rishi was there for the conversation. And then there was another man who had a nice blunt in his hand. But while he was talking to me, he claimed he was Jesus. I thought it was interesting. I just had a nice big conversation with the Christian about having faith in Jesus. And then it ended with a prayer where he prayed for me and Rishi. We all held hands and prayed that we would have a deep connection with Christ and that Christ would reveal himself to us. And the next guy we talked to, he claimed he was Jesus. I was like, oh goodness, But I wasn't so convinced he was Jesus because I couldn't imagine that Jesus would have been smoking weed right in front of me. But anyway, it was fine, So we thought we would. But we were talking about how actually, especially me and his name was Ahmed. He was nice. But how if we could get over the selfishness of man, that we could have this type of, Parikshit, under the proper administration, we could have like a heaven on earth. In the kingdom at that time, it was like a heaven on earth for all of those in that civilization. So anyway, this is the type of ruler that Parikshit was. And the Supreme Lord wants all living beings to be obedient to him and thereby become happy. So if we're just obedient to the Lord, we could have this heaven on earth even. Therefore, the king's interest is to guide all subjects back to the kingdom of God. Hence, the activities of the citizens should be so coordinated that they can, at the end, go back home, back to Godhead. This is a very wonderful canto, this first canto. Prabhupada put everything he had into this first canto. So you're going to learn everything about what proper government would look like, what proper politics, what proper wealth, what proper religion, all the Purusharthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Prabhupada is explaining all of that in this first canto. So you actually, it's our great fortune to have Prabhupada, because he actually didn't know if he was going to make it beyond this first canto. So he put everything he could. You could say overextended himself into this first canto. It was perfect. It wasn't overextended. But he put so much more into this than you'll notice in all the other cantos. There's so much more depth in this first canto than you're going to get in all the other cantos. So it's very, you're going to get everything, how society should be run, how, pretty much all of, it's like a manifesto to have perfection on earth. So anyway, all the subjects, a king's interest to guide all subjects back to the kingdom of God. Hence, the activities of the citizens should be so coordinated that they can at the end go back home, back to Godhead. Under the administration of a representative king, the kingdom is full of opulence. At that time, human beings need not eat animals. So this is one key to how to have some prosperity and good fortune come to us. If we eat animals, we're pretty much destroying our good karma, because we're causing mass suffering unto others. So when war and things like that come about, you can't be surprised, because what is the collective karma of everyone? We're just our bellies are slaughterhouses. So anyway, there are ample food grains, milk, fruit, and vegetables, so that the human beings as well as the animals can eat sumptuously and to their heart's content. If all living beings are satisfied with food and shelter and obey the prescribed rules, there cannot be any disturbance between one living being and another. Emperor Parikshit was a worthy king, and therefore all were happy during his reign. So even there was technically animal sacrifices, but even that was done in such a way that the animal was given an elevated birth. Prabhupada will eventually explain that. But it's not that nobody ate animals. Actually, the Kshatriyas, it was common that the Kshatriyas, the warriors, were the ones who were supposed to eat animals, because they needed the strength that animal meat would give for fighting, actually. But you would never just kill an animal unnecessarily. It was done in sacrifice and proper worship. The Jews have this type of process where it's called kosher. It's not similar necessarily to kosher, but they would perform proper sacrifices, and it's said that the mantras chanted by the brahmanas in such a sacrifice, they were so potent that the animal would be given a human or a demigod birth in the next life. It was ultimately for the animal's welfare as well. But this process of slaughterhouses and mercilessly killing animal with no proper sacrifice, and even if everyone did what the Jews and even the Christians are supposed to do, and even the Muslims did, and everything was properly done under the halal or kosher, it would greatly reduce the amount of slaughter and heinous activity that's happening. But it's largely not being done at all. So anyway, there was a way to potentially eat animals, but it was really reserved for the warrior class. The other classes had no need. We personally, most of it, unless you're maybe a Navy SEAL and you have to go, fight people and kill people and things like that, there's probably no need for animal slaughter in your life. It actually will likely cause a detrimental effect to the mind if you're not using, if you're not like a fighter, or using that type of energy in such an aggressive way. So anyway, we're seeing this. There's all kinds of disease. The number one killer in the world is heart disease, which can be avoided exclusively just avoiding eating animals. You can avoid heart disease. Vegans they avoid it altogether. They'll die some other way. But anyway. Tat sarvam na samachakshva prishto yadiha kinchana manye tvam vishaye vacham snatam anyatra chandasa tat that sarvam all naha unto us samachakshva clearly explain prishtaha question yadiha herein kinchana all that manye we think Tvam,
Tvam.
you,
You.
Vishaye,
Vishaye.
in all subjects,
In all subjects.
Vacham,
Vacham.
meanings of words,
Meanings.
Snatam,
Sanatam.
fully acquainted,
Fully acquainted.
Anyatra,
Anyatra.
except Chandasa,
Chandasa.
portion of the Vedas.
Vedas.
So now they're saying, the sages are to Sutta Goswami, we know that you are expert in the meaning of all subjects, except some portions of the Vedas, and thus you can clearly explain the answers to all the questions we have just put to you. So it's again referencing how expert that Sutta Goswami is and why they're asking him in this assembly. Remember that this is happening at the in the forest of Naimisharanya, the great sacrifice. Remember, just to give everyone a reminder of where this is, what's happening. There's a 1,000-year sacrifice, ultimately for the benefit of the people in Kali Yuga. We're in this Kali Yuga. How are we going to benefit? And actually what ends up happening is they ask Sutta Goswami, and Sutta Goswami, he says, the Bhagavatam. This is what's going to ultimately benefit the people of Kali Yuga. So then he starts reciting the Bhagavatam. And the Bhagavatam, and they wanted to hear about the Bhagavatam. And the Bhagavatam was originally spoken by Shukadeva Goswami and Emperor Parikshit. So now they're describing both, Sutta Goswami is describing both Emperor Parikshit and Shukadeva Goswami. And now this Bhagavatam is going to be presented. Ultimately, it was going to be the ultimate cream, the benefit for the people of Kali Yuga, and it's going to be our ultimate benefit. And it's the final Shastra given by Vedavyas. There are now maybe more modern Shastras in Chaitanya Lila that might be considered that Vyas has continued. But for all common knowledge, this is the final Shastra, the conclusion of all of the Vedic purports given by Vyas. And now we'll study it, and we'll get great benefit. So I'm just setting that.
It's great that in Bhagavatam you kind of see that there is a story. First of all, Sutta Goswami is explaining to Naimisharanya Rishis, which is where he is explaining a story about Shukadeva Goswami, who explains a story.
Yes.
And you kind of go in 4 stories inside.
It's like an inception of stories.
Inception
Inception of story of stories of stories of
Sometimes you
stories.
have gone like 4 stories inside.
Yes, there's many stories deep. You're gonna go into many
Shukadeva Goswami is
inceptions.
explaining about Yudhishthira Maharaj and Narad Muni is explaining
Yeah.
the story.
Yeah, it goes. You're gonna go many stories deep here, many leelas deep. That's very nice, Rishi.
But it also shows that how knowledge has been transferred. It has been transferred through Guru Parampara and through authentic discussion, and not like what I think and what you think.
Yes.
It's more like what the great personalities talked when this topic was
That's
talked.
right. Yeah, it's not a mental concoction.
Yes.
Well, I think like this, and I think like this. What do you know? Why is your opinion so important? This is not the proper way to get anywhere in life. So they refer to authorities. So okay, Sutta Goswami says actually, this it's not. He's so expert in everything, and he refers to what Shukadeva Goswami said, who was clearly expert. And then Shukadeva Goswami, he'll refer to what all the great personalities, the Mahajans of the past, what they have done, and so on like this. So this is, and ultimately it leads back to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is worthy of having an opinion, because he is the ultimate creator, controller, all knowledgeable, all powerful, all sweet and wonderful personality. So that opinion, that's what we should strive to know. So we'll get that in this as well. Prabhupada says, the difference between the Vedas and the Puranas is like that between the Brahmanas and the Parivrajakaas. The Brahmanas are meant to administer some fruitive sacrifices mentioned in the Vedas, but the Parivrajakacharyas, or learned preachers, are meant to disseminate transcendental knowledge to one and all. As such, the Parivrajakacharyas are not always expert in pronouncing the Vedic mantras, which are practiced systematically by accent and meter by the Brahmanas, who are meant for administering Vedic rites. Yet it should not be considered that the Brahmanas are more important than the itinerant preachers. They are one and different simultaneously because they are meant for the same end in different ways. So he's comparing Brahmana and Parivrajacharya. Parivrajakacharyas are like the preachers, and he's saying the Puranas are like the Parivrajakacharyas, and the Vedas are like the Brahmanas. The Vedas have a lot of formality, rites. If you want to get this result, if you want to get this result, it's very formal, where the Puranas more are giving the essence, and actually usually for the well-being of all. Where the Vedas are going to be very focused on certain results, and it's like Vedas would say like almost like a rule book of different sacrifices that one could do. No problem. They're both very useful, and they're both one and different, because the Puranas are leading you towards the progression of sacrifices that the Vedas are giving, and the progression ultimately leads back to the Supreme Person, the Supreme Personality, to God. So anyway, this is a nice analogy. He's also saying there's no difference also between the Vedic mantras and what is explained in the Puranas and Itihasa, which are histories. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, it is mentioned in the Madhyandina Shruti that all the Vedas, namely the Sama, Atharva, Rig, Yajur, Puranas, Itihasas, Upanishads, etc., are emanations from the breathing of the Supreme Being. The only difference is that the Vedic mantras are mostly begun with pranava omkara, and it requires some training to practice the metric pronunciation of the Vedic mantras. But that does not mean that Srimad Bhagavatam is of less importance than the Vedic mantras. On the contrary, it is the ripened fruit of all the Vedas, as stated before. Besides that, the most perfectly liberated soul, Srila Shukadeva Goswami, is absorbed in the studies of the Bhagavatam, although he's already self-realized. Srila Sutta Goswami is following in his footsteps, and therefore his position is not the least less important because he was not expert in chanting Vedic mantras with metric pronunciation, which depends more on practice than actual realization. Realization is more important than parrot-like chanting. So this is also, Prabhupada is saying this for us too. We also can do parrot-like chanting. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. But actually, where's the realization in who Krishna is, what Hare is, what Rama is, and what is our inner intention in calling this mantra? So, Vedic mantras are very important, no doubt. But ultimately, the essence, the realization, which are the Puranas, are the realization of such Vedic mantras. Actually, he kind of is alluding, is more important. He's saying Srimad Bhagavatam is the ripened fruit of the Vedas. And you could argue that the fruit is ultimately what we come to take from a tree. The tree is obviously very important. There is no fruit without the tree. But the fruit is what we come to take, and that's the essence given to us. So we should focus more on realization more than on rituals and parrot-like chanting and things like that. So this was just mentioned right on our Friday class in the pastime of Krishna and the Brahmins' wives. The Brahmanas, they had all of the rituals and the parrot-like chanting down, but the Brahmins' wives had the realization. That was just practically experienced in our katha on Friday. We'll do one more verse. Sutta vacha dvapare samanupraptye. I said praptye. Samanuprapte. Sorry.
Samanuprapte.
Yes. Tritiye yuga paryaye jata parasharad yogi vasavyam kalayahare. Sutta Goswami Uvacha said Dwapare in the second millennium, Samanu Prapte on the advent of, Tritiye third, Yuga millennium, Paryaye in the place of, Jataha was begotten, Parashara by Parashara, Yogi the great sage, Vasavyam in the womb of the daughter of Vasu, Kalaya
Kalaya,
in the plenary
in the
portion,
plenary portion,
Hare
Hare,
of the personality of
or the
Godhead.
personality of Godhead.
Sutta Goswami said, when the second millennium overlapped the third, the great sage Vyasadeva was born to Parashara in the womb of Satyavati, the daughter of Vasu. So now it's going to give us some chronological order here. Purport, there is a chronological order of the 4 millenniums, namely Satya, Dwapar, Treta, and Kali, but sometimes there's overlapping. During the regime of Vivaswatu Manu, there was an overlapping of the 28th round of the 4 millenniums, and the 3rd millennium appeared prior to the 2nd. In that particular millennium, Lord Sri Krishna also descends, and because of this, there was some particular alteration. The mother of the great sage was Satyavati, the daughter of the Vasu, fisherman, which is a fisherman. And the father was the great Parashara Muni. That is the history of Vyasadev's birth. Every millennium is divided into 3 periods, and each period is called a Sandhya. Vyasadeva appeared in the 3rd Sandhya of that particular age. So he's giving a chronological order of when the author, the original speaker of the Bhagavatam, Vyasadeva, when he was born. This is all relayed in the Mahabharata. If you ever go through the Mahabharata, this will be relayed, this pastime, how Parashara finds Satyavati in the fisherman's boat, and he's very attracted, and so on. So like this, and actually Vasu is the reason that Bhishma, so and so on. I don't want to get into all the pastimes, but but it all unfolds in a wild story. Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita is part of Mahabharata. It's like the ripened fruit of Mahabharata. The Mahabharata goes through so many pastimes and stories, ultimately to lead you to the great fruit of Bhagavad Gita, the great teaching that concludes Mahabharata. So anyway, this is now we're going to get into some history, and this will be fun. You know what? Let's do one more verse. We have time. Ready? Sa kadachit sarasvatya
Sakadachit sarasvasya
upasprishya jalam shuchi
upasrishya jalam suchi
vivikta eka asina
vikta ekasina
udite ravi mandale
udite ravi mandale
saha he kadachit once sarasvatya on the bank of the Saraswati upasprishya after finishing morning ablutions, like prayers and rituals and things like that. Jalam, water. Shuchi, being purified. Vivikte, concentration. Eka, alone. Asina, being thus seated. Udite, on the rise. Ravi Mandale, on the sun disk. Once upon a time, he, Vyasadeva, as the sun rose, took his morning ablution in the waters of the Saraswati and sat alone to concentrate. Now the Saraswati river is no longer manifested, at least physically. It is seems to have dried up in certain areas.
In my city, it's called Triveni Sangam.
Yes.
Triveni means 3.
Yes, but there's only 2 running there.
2 you can see, and the third one is Saraswati, which you cannot see.
Yes.
It's also sung. So it was a song of 3 rivers back in the days. So
Yes.
that
It's
was
underground now.
What?
We have some water, but it's underground. It's not.
Yes. So it's not externally manifest,
It's
but
flowing, but it's underground.
yes, I see. So, but the river Saraswati was manifest at the time, and Vyasadeva was doing his ablutions on the side of it. Actually, Prabhupada says, the river Saraswati is flowing in the Badarik Ashram area of the Himalayas. So the place indicated here is Shamya Prash in Badarik Ashram, where Sri Vyasadeva is residing. So, we're going to end here today. We'll continue our study of Bhagavatam tomorrow. We'll just keep making advancement by hearing this Bhagavatam. We'll keep going through these things, being reminded of the ultimate purpose of life. This will guide our days. Without study of Bhagavatam, I was really appreciating, Sahil told me the other day, because we didn't do Bhagavatam in the morning because we had programs later in the day. And Sahil was saying that his day started not nearly as good as when we were doing Bhagavatam. So to me, that was a personal confirmation that something we're doing here is very good, it's very effective. And you'll see for yourself, I don't know if anyone does listen in online, probably not too many.
There are 3 people.
Wow. But
Tito, Mataji and Sean.
oh, okay, very good. So yeah, but if you guys do somehow listen online, you'll see a great improvement in your life. And yeah, good luck. All right, Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you so much. We'll continue.